Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Negotiation. On today's show, we are really excited to talk to Elijah Whaley, VP of Marketing APAC at Launchmetrics, the leading brand performance cloud solution used by fashion, luxury, and beauty executives to connect with the modern consumer in a constantly changing landscape. Elijah is also the host of PARKLU China Influencer Marketing Podcast, a bi-monthly show which features guests who share their unique insights and perspectives on industry developments. We kick things off talking about how the KOL space has changed over the last 5 years, then discuss in depth how he worked with one influencer in particular, Melilim Fu, and grew her following to become one of the most famous and successful KOLs in China. We also discuss Launchmetrics and the problems they aim to solve in today's marketplace, what it's like to scale a startup as a C-suite executive in China, and further explore the dramatic rise of influencers in China. Enjoy.
Because China is a high context culture, it's very relationship based. And you have these rings of influence that people aggregate much more so than other places in the world, like America or Europe. They aggregate to groups of people like us do things like this. You know, America is a much more independent nation where everybody's looking and seeking their own individualism and their own feeling special about themselves. But here people feel special about themselves by being involved with a group that they consider special.
Home to over 4 billion people, the Asia-Pacific region boasts one of the most powerful consumer markets on the planet. Not only is it home to half the world's under 30 population, but it's also home to more than half the world's internet users. It's a market no globally minded brand should ignore, but entering markets like China is no easy task. Just ask the likes of Microsoft, Google, Uber, and Facebook. Times are changing, and with the right partners, doors are slowly opening as more and more companies find success expanding into the markets of the Middle Kingdom. I myself spent 8 years in China, mostly as a venture capitalist, helping early-stage tech companies enter the Asia-Pacific market successfully. This show is dedicated to uncovering and examining successful China entry and growth strategies by interviewing the people behind those success stories. My name is Todd Embley, and welcome to The Negotiation, brought to you by WPIC Marketing and Technologies. Elijah, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Quick introduction of yourself, if you don't mind. Tell us how you ended up in China, how long you've lived there, type of work you've been doing, all that.
Sure. So I'm originally from the American Midwest, from Omaha, Nebraska. And I was in video production before, and I could kind of see that industry changing very quickly. I thought I was kind of one of the middlemen that would get kind of crushed whenever there's a good change in any industry, that is having a kind of a revolution. Went back to school. They told me that China had a really great growth story, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so I came over and in 2011, and then came back permanently in late 2013. And I've essentially been with marketing technology startups ever since, and specifically focused on KOL marketing or influencer marketing, and had kind of some special side stories on my own as far as building my own influencer from scratch, and then joining a marketplace technology company that was acquired late last year. And so that's where my knowledge really is specialized, is in that vertical.
How did you jump into the KOL space?
Yeah, what was really interesting is I kind of mentioned there, I knew, it's kind of like, I look at like AI driving technology. In AI driving technology, it's the CEOs and the mechanics are going to be fine. It's all the middle guys that are going to get obliterated. They're all going to lose their jobs, or they're going to get new jobs. And the same thing I could see was happening in video, which was a passion of mine since I was 16 years old. But I could see that the ability to create, distribute, and consume visual content was changing so quickly that these middle band of people were going to get kind of crushed. And that's where I saw myself. And so once I came over to China and I saw what was happening with content creation through cell phones and distribution through social media and the consumption, I looked at this and went, oh man, this is it. This was the thing that I was kind of afraid of happening as far as my potential for my career growth and, income and things like that. And I think most people realize that, the decentralization of everything, information and finance and content is where everything is going. And the reason why decentralization works so well is because we all have these unique needs and use cases and desires, and the ability to create, distribute, and consume what is uniquely interesting to you is just a magical concept. And so as soon as I was exposed to it in China, working with marketing technology startups, I was a content marketing director, and we'd send out content for distribution and go to these people called KOLs. And I learned what a KOL was, and I was like, oh, this is what I was afraid of. This is the future here. And so shortly after that, I was just like, well, I gotta get into this thing somehow. And I met someone that I ended up partnering with, and we started to develop her into a KOL. And over about a 5-year period, she developed into one of the most popular KOLs in the country. And during that time, I started blogging about it and doing talks, and joined another company, PARKLU. And that's kind of how that story goes.
Yeah, you bet. We're going to actually dig into a bunch of that stuff. Let's first talk a little bit about KOLs, okay? The key opinion leaders, for those who don't know. How have they evolved over the past 5 or so years?
Yeah, so originally it was kind of, individuals that were passionate about certain topics, whether it be fashion or makeup or sports or tennis shoes. And they would, blog about it or take pictures or shoot videos and talk about it to a small community. But that has become a mega industry. And is now we have, in China, we have what is called the MCNs, a multi-channel network, which is a business that aggregates KOLs into a single organization. We have 30,000 MCNs in China, registered companies, which some of those have a couple of KOLs and some of them have hundreds, sometimes even thousands of KOLs that are signed with them, that they can use, that brands can use to, run advertising campaigns, or the brand can use to create their own brands and sell things. And we had an MCN a couple of years ago called Ruhan, who specifically created KOLs with the explicit intention of creating brands go public on the NASDAQ. It's a huge industry. And now the next evolution of it now is this live streaming e-commerce thing, which I think 10% of, gross sales are done through live streams now in China. And these hosts, who essentially are KOLs, they're just mega powers in the ability to sell. And that's kind of the next evolution that we're kind of seeing over here.
Mm-hmm. You are the co-founder of one of China's top ranking beauty KOLs. Can you introduce, and you alluded to her before, can you introduce who is Melilim Fu and what your work with her looked like?
Melilim Fu, when I met her, she was a makeup artist. She was a high-end makeup artist. So working with celebrities and fashion shows kind of around the world and doing covers for high-end magazines and things like that. And when I met, I recognized that, hey, this is with my background in content creation and her specific skills in actually being able to teach people something. I knew that the intersection of education and entertainment was the sweet spot when it came to content marketing or content development. And that is, everybody wants to be entertained, but also to be educated and to be entertained at the same time provides the maximum amount of value and bang for your buck as far as your time investment into anything. And so just really took that strict strategy. And, when it was very small, just her and I, and, working in the living room and a lot of testing, and had some really big failures at times. But this, a lot of these types of things it's kind of about staying power. If you can consistently create several posts a week and high quality, and keep that content very high quality, and you can do that for years, you're going to attract people. And if you're providing value to them and creating community, that's a really valuable proposition. And the really interesting thing was the businesses, in this specific case, and this is very common with KOLs, they are talking about products. They're teaching about how to dress, or how to do your makeup, or what sports, athletic gear to use, or something like that. And the funny thing is the brands that sell these things, they really missed an opportunity in the age of social to be social. They approached social media as a sales channel. And because of that, and the reality is, none of us would ever hang out with someone that every time they approached you, they tried to sell you something. That's not what friends do. Where these KOLs came in, and they came with an idea of, I'm going to continue to provide you value. And that value builds affinity and reciprocity that later can be leveraged to sell things. And so what's so funny is you have, the biggest companies in the world, the Nikes and the, L'Oreals and things like that. In some ways, they're kind of beholden to all of these girls and young people and boys that have put in the effort to provide value for an audience first and not ask for something.
Interestingly, you talk about Melilim like she is a business. And that I find that fascinating. With a co-founder, angel investors, a business development strategy, everything. This is just really interesting, the way, the tone and that whole circumference of that person / business / entity. Is that how most KOLs are managed? Is it that way? Are as though they are businesses?
Originally, no, but today, yes, 100%. Because you can't be competitive, and you can't build something of value without it. I took that approach very early on because I saw it as a business, and I thought of myself as an entrepreneur, and I wanted to make an income from this, and saw that there was real potential there. The reality is today, the competitiveness of the market, the ease of creating the content, the ease of the distribution, has made it that unless you have a very concerted effort with a strategy and, some potential money behind, whether that's in the creation of the content or the paid for distribution, and then, potential business development for collaborations or getting sponsorships and things like that, it's going to be very, very challenging. Even with that, the success rate isn't any better. I would say it's even lower than a classic startup. I kind of equate it to the, celebrities, sports, actors, singers, kind of world where, less than 1% is making a killing, and maybe a few percent is making a living, and the rest are starving. And they'll never get anything more than, maybe some product seeded, stuff from brands, and they might aggregate several hundred or several thousand followers, but that's not going to be enough to be able to leverage to make an income from, except for in special cases. I think It's unfortunate. I think that there's some theories, and I actually do believe in them, around this idea of having 1,000 real fans. And if 1,000 real fans all gave you $100 a year, then, you'd make $100,000 a year. But unfortunately, a lot of young people who think about influencers and wanting to be influencers don't think about it that way. They think about the moonshot and being famous and all the luxury. They don't think about it in a way of, hey, this could support my passion of creating art or producing something that could be consumed by a small audience. So there's still a lot of potential there, but unfortunately, a lot of the focus and media and attraction to it is the more viral celebrity style.
Do most KOLs have an extensive team behind them? How many people worked on Melilim's team, and what were the different roles?
Yeah, so for the first 2 years, it was just her and I. And there were a couple of projects that we needed to bring in, more of a professional team on, because we had special opportunities to work on larger kind of things. So we'd work with a small, team, maybe a professional director, maybe some professional photographer or videographer or something like that. But for the first couple of years, there was no income. There wasn't anything to make money on. Like there wasn't there you couldn't afford anything outside of that. And it was more of a labor of love than anything. And then by the third year, things started to get pretty serious, and we were able to have kind of more of a full-time assistant, I guess. And then later, a designer, and it didn't quite go beyond that, because a lot of it was just freelance help when you need it. So, and because of my background as far as a content creator and skills that she was able also to learn, and then some of my, business acumen or experience, and then business development and things, that that was a very special case. And I was kind of shocked by the fourth year, what kind of, potential there was for income and things like that. But essentially, there was a lot of dues to pay to get to that point. Today, though, the real traditional, what's happening in the market today, though, with like the MCNs, is they are bringing typically a girl or guy in at an early stage in their development. So they're already creating content. Then they get reached out to by an MCN. The MCN says, hey, we want to pick you up. We're going to take you through some training courses on how to do what you do better. Then we're going to give you maybe a small team or help you with content creation. We're going to put some money behind distributing your content, and then have a BD team to help bring in brands and sponsorship. And so it's at those scales, it's a very, very different model. It's very, very challenging, and very few people do it the way that I did it in the past, just because it's become so industrialized.
During those 2 years, when it was just you and Melilim, how did you explain to your parents what it is that you did? I guess that's an interesting question. It was okay, because the reality is that, I was able to show and share videos or share pictures and say, hey, this is a real industry and this is a real thing. And the reason why I was able to kind of explain it is because, it was also related to my full-time job. I was making an income on the side, kind of working with these people anyways. I was already an expat, and already in that way, maybe a black sheep doing my own thing anyways. So it wasn't too bizarre that way. But it is a little bit of a hard thing to wrap your head around, that I think it might've been more difficult for her parents to understand, because she had a
career that was kind of successful and on a track. I was already maybe not mainstream from a Chinese perspective, but then to go in and say, hey, I'm really going to invest my time and effort into this thing did seem strange. And the fact that it was so new and yeah, it was quite risk. It was high risk. You have to have high risk appetite for something that the chance of failure is very, very high. And even, the funny thing for me was as a marketer and someone that was even the early stages of PARKLU, when I was a CMO for the company and building a platform and working with brands, I still had other marketers in the industry telling me that this whole KOL thing and influencers was a fluke and it's going to crash and this whole industry is going to go away. And I knew that wasn't true because they didn't understand the power of decentralized information and content. And I knew that it was just going to grow and be bigger and bigger. And sometimes you can get into certain, when you catch the wave just right, you start paddling and you're ready to stand on the board, like you can just grow with the growth of the industry. You just have to be there, kind of thing. And so there was also that aspect of it, of like just having faith in what you're doing.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the other acronym, the KOCs. Okay, so I guess now we've evolved, and we've actually had KOCs come up a little bit on the podcast before. We know that they're key opinion consumers or customers. Are they the same as micro influencers in the West? How might they be different, and just differentiate KOC from KOL?
I have a little bit different theory around KOCs than even kind of maybe some mainstream understanding of KOCs. KOCs are kind of seen as micro influencers, so very, very small followers base, consumers that when they buy a product, they talk about it, kind of thing. I have a very different philosophy on this, in that I believe KOCs are a definition for something that's existed for a long time, which is an advocate, a brand advocate, but it's a digital brand advocate. And because of that, recognizing that it's a digital brand advocate and putting a new label on it and a new approach, you can leverage it in a completely different way. And really what that means is a KOC is a brand's customer. And it is a brand's customer that when they talk about your product, they generate more sales. And as a brand, if you're able to identify these customers that when they consume your products, they talk about them and generate more sales, you can put this label of KOC on them and put them into a new basket and say, hey, this is an extremely valuable asset to our organization. We need to treat this person differently and leverage them as a communications channel. And really what I see today is I think the greatest way and the most inexpensive way towards customer acquisition is through retention. And there is way, way too little focus on customer retention and leveraging the customers you have as communication channels, as marketing channels. And so what we're seeing in China today is really radical, actually. And that is every brand touch point is evolving into an experience that brands are trying to transform by surprising and delighting customers to compel them to capture and share the brand experience to become marketing channels. And they're literally breaking things down and saying, hey, when the customer comes into the store, we need to over deliver, surprise and delight, and create it in a visceral way so that someone wants to take their phone out, capture this and share it, because we know this is the most impactful way of communicating with other potential customers, because it's word of mouth from an individual that others know, love, and trust. And this is very transformative to marketing approaches from top to bottom, because it spans not just the PR communications kind of thing. It's every single point that a brand and a customer meet. And so we're seeing how store experiences are changing, how customer service interactions are changing, how packaging design is changing, how unboxing is changing, how product life cycles and what the functionality of a product might be is changing, all in the specific goal to drive the consumer to share.
We had Gregory Prud'homme on the show earlier, and he was talking about even just designing spaces. And, we've actually had, I think Andy Siegfrieds was on here too, talking about this. The way they're designing spaces in China right now, the clients are like, what is Instagram worthy? Right. This is because, again, we want to get an influencer in here because this place is so Instagram worthy. This is where we want them to be shooting some of their stuff. I mean, that's the level of impact it's having, especially and really just generating right out of China, is this kind of tidal wave of that kind of thought process, which is really an incredible, shift to think about.
Totally. When, and I describe it as this really simply is, what can you do? The simplest one to me is kind of like, the Amazon box or the Taobao box arriving at your home, and what a disappointing kind of bland experience that is. This brown box, you open it up and it's wrapped in cellophane or bubble wrap, and the product falls on the floor once you're done wrapping it. And what can brands do when that box is being opened, that there's sounds, lights, and colors and smells that someone says, holy crap, I got to grab my phone and I need to capture this and share this because this is a really special, interesting moment. And so that idea of, again, what can you do to over deliver on these very common experiences that allow someone to have a special moment in their life that's worth sharing with other people in their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, I've even seen it cross paths and it just through other influencer type. I can't say they're influencer platforms, things like Instagram stuff where you would see some of these things and, the camera pans through the room, maybe past a mirror, and then onto maybe the bed or something where there's a bunch of boxes of product that have come in and it's an unboxing episode and they lift the lid and there's the product. And I mean, you would have to think that product producers, packaging designers are all now involved in understanding what is this going to look like on camera when an influencer opens this up? What's that reaction going to be? We need to invest in that.
Totally. So I love this one package. It's actually from Japan, but there's a package in Japan where one side is printed backwards so that the customer can hold it up in the mirror and take a selfie with themselves in the mirror, and it's written forwards. So you don't get the reversed image. And it's that kind of dynamic thinking too about, hey, what can we do to make the selfie that much easier and allow the customer to advertise for us?
Right. I think they call that ambulance marketing. Just kidding. For those of us who have, it's written backwards for the rearview mirror. Let's talk a little bit about PARKLU. What is PARKLU and what are the problems that PARKLU is solving in the marketplace today?
Yeah. So, PARKLU doesn't exist as PARKLU anymore. It was acquired late last year by Launchmetrics, and Launchmetrics is a global marketing, or they're building a global marketing performance cloud for the fashion, luxury, and business brands. And we are their first foray into China. And so that acquisition was very strategic around data acquisition and being able to build a truly global influencer marketing platform. So we, as a company, were specifically focused on China mainland, supplying analytics and a searchable KOL database and an end-to-end campaign solution. And now that is quickly evolving into a global influencer marketing platform that any brand can, see the performance of global campaigns. And this is actually one of my favorite things that's come out of the ability for a brand to have a truly, truly global influencer impact campaign. And this is where we're seeing changes in strategy because of having this type of access to technology, where a brand in the US can now select influencers, not just based upon the performance that they will have and the impact that they'll have in the States, but also now we know that some influencers in the States are also popular in China. They have followings, they have super fans that create fan pages and, re-download their YouTube videos and translate them and post them on Bilibili or Douyin or, TikTok and these other platforms. And so what we can do now is say, hey, here's your list of 10 influencers you wanted to work with, but these two who are going to perform just as well as the other 8 are also popular in China. So you should work with these two because you get this amplification effect over in China because of the distribution of super fans. And it's that kind of really cool stuff that you can do when you have visibility through data and an aggregated, network like that.
What was your experience like from the beginning with PARKLU? I believe you joined in 2017. Obviously, we know it was acquired in late 2020. So just talking about the growth of the company, but what is it like, maybe even as an expat, to participate in the rapid growth of a startup and of a company, being a part of kind of, that C-suite, and then all the way growing it, experiencing that growth in China, the corporate growth, the hiring, the team, the challenges, the highlights. Can you talk to what that experience was like for you? And then on the back of that, we'll kind of tail end that with, what if the company was based outside of China? Can you possibly talk to how that experience might have been different?
Pre-PARKLU, I had 2 horrible experiences with total crash and burn failure startups, where they just founders breaking up, and in one case, and another one where I was a CMO of another marketing tech platform, and we ran out of money, and so I had all of the failure experiences also, which were quite painful and mentally disruptive, and affect your body and all of that kind of stuff too. And so to then join one that had it's timing. I really, really feel like timing is the big secret in the startup world. If you can hit that wave right, if you see the swell and you start paddling and you position yourself properly, that's the big secret. And the other thing that I saw that was really important, and it's very, very challenging in China, was talent acquisition. And I think that that's a real testament to our CEO and founder, Kim Leitzis. She is incredibly talented at, one, being able to be patient to hire the right people, because a lot of startups have this kind of hire fast and fire faster mentality. And she was able to wait and find and hire the right people. And organizations are as strong and as weak as the people that run them. And she was really, really good at finding talent, and can be very challenging in China, especially in the technology world, because so many young people here and so many talented people here want and have access to working for these huge, VC funded startups or very large tech companies. And so finding that kind of passionate talent, talented talent can be a real challenge. But going from, 0 to 1, it was awesome. I mean, it was super hard, and it meant working like crazy and making lots of sacrifices. But, as a marketer, for me, it was such a wonderful experience to learn and, to be a jack sometimes of all trades, because you have to do a lot of stuff, because that's what you do in a startup. You don't just get to focus maybe on what you're passionate about all the time. And then you learn all these kind of fun growth hacking things and how to, everything from manipulate algorithms to how to, smooth talk with people you got to talk with. And it was a wonderful adventure. And we really picked, I was very fortunate because, again, over the last, I guess 4 or 5 years, KOL marketing, influencer marketing has just been on this tremendous growth cycle. And it's very interesting. People find it to be fascinating because it does kind of align with this kind of celebrity-ish type of thing. And so it was, excuse me. So it aligns with this celebrity type of world and something that's very fascinating to people. And so there was a lot of opportunities. People wanted to learn about it. People wanted to hear. People were very interested. And for businesses, it had real potential to impact their bottom line. And they knew that it was important because that's where the awareness was. The eyeballs had shifted away from all of the traditional channels, and they had to make actions there. And so in many ways, there was just a lot of fortune there. And the one strange thing that was quite interesting was that first year in 2017. So one of my first initiatives was I am going to, I'm going to just talk to everybody in this industry that I can talk to. And I learned very quickly that in North America at that time, there was like over 200 influencer marketing marketplace technology platforms. And in Europe, there was another couple hundred. I think globally, there was like 500 of these influencer marketing kind of technology platforms. And I talked to the CEOs or CMOs of almost 100 of those platforms over about a 6-month period, because I really, really wanted to just understand the industry and create connections and hopefully, have, whatever referral deals and co-branding opportunities and such. But the interesting thing about China was it was much, much less competitive. In 2017, we really only considered ourselves to have about 4 competitors. And I'm not really 100% sure why that was, because typically in China, like if something is working and there's a business model that other people can potentially latch onto, you're going to have a lot of people getting into the space. But the influencer marketing technology world didn't have that same kind of competitiveness in the space. And so in some ways it kind of had a little bit of blue ocean there. And so we were able to select our niche, and which was, a little bit more focused on the foreign businesses. And we had a dual language bilingual platform, English and Chinese, and really focused on communicating in English content-wise to marketers. And so that really carved out a really nice niche for us that gave us a big advantage there. So in some ways, like I see that there was a lot of luck and fortune there that I don't think I would have experienced or we would have experienced if we were say in the US or in another market, because it just was so much more competitive.
Influencer marketing is pretty new, generally speaking, because, in the past it was, celebrities, big name celebrities. They were really the only ones that could, get these kind of big name sponsorships by Nike and, wear our clothes, wear our brands, wear our logos as you do your things. Maybe come and do a commercial and be the face of L'Oreal for a while or something like this, And I just find it fascinating that, then there was the influencers. Then they started realizing there were, people creating content and becoming influencers, and then we could use them. And, then we saw, like the Bang energy drinks and everything just go nuts with leveraging that and really kind of setting that off. But China has taken it to a whole new level. And to me, they relatively came out of nowhere, where they weren't as obsessed with this before, to now being the world leader. Am I right? And how did this happen in China?
I think I melt it down to culture, because China is a high context culture. It's very relationship based, and you have these rings of influence that people aggregate much more so than other places in the world, like America or Europe. They aggregate to groups of people like us do things like this. And, America is a much more independent nation, where everybody's looking and seeking their own kind of individualism and their own feeling special about themselves. But here people feel special about themselves by being involved with a group that they consider special. And so influencers kind of play very perfectly to that cultural psychology of people like us, listen to this influencer and buy this influencer's stuff and consume this type of content and look these ways and say these things. And then there's another aspect that's really interesting as part of the relationship building process in China, part of Guanxi, is this idea of reciprocity. And I really, really believe this is true in the West too, but it's not quite understood the way that maybe it can be explained here. Guanxi relationships here are very, very much built upon a kind of a gifting culture or reciprocity. And so, and if you read any Chinese business 80 book from the 80s, you're going to know that, like, you're supposed to, when you meet a new business partner, bring them a small gift and they're going to give you a gift. And the reason why you do this is because that's a way of establishing trust and affinity with each other. And those gifts get bigger over time. I give you something, and then later you give me something a little bit more valuable. And then later I give you something a little bit more valuable. And it goes to the point where we can sign multi-million-dollar deals with each other. Well, on the individual basis, on social media, I recognize that content is a gift. It has all of the earmarkings of a gift. There's labor in there involved, there's cost involved, time, and even money. And it's something that has value to the receiver. And so these KOLs are consistently giving gifts to their followers. And the followers, the best way that they can pay them back is by liking, commenting, reposting, and being an advocate for that individual. And given enough time and enough reciprocity buildup, the audience actually has a sense of indebtedness, to the point where when the influencer collaborates with a brand and says, hey, buy this, there's almost a sense of indebtedness to buy that thing, because you have been receiving so much value from this individual for so long that the best way that you could support them and pay them back is by buying something from this collaboration they have, which will support their livelihood and income, therefore allowing them to continue to produce value for you in the future. And so it's actually plays perfectly into the relationship psychology of Chinese people. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's kind of an increased amplification effect of the KOL ecosystem in comparison to maybe the influencer ecosystem in lower context, more individualistic cultures in other parts of the world.
Would you be willing to give us one or two recommended other guests who might be experts in certain fields, in China, people that you yourself might be interested to hear speak on our podcast?
Sure. Yeah, I really like Michael Norris. He's kind of a funny young, or not so funny, but he's a young guy that is very strongly opinionated, but has really smart stuff to say, and is very. And I can give you that direct contact if you need it. Michael Norris is a good one to have. I don't know if you listened to one of my early podcasts with William something. He was one of the first big KOLs in China, a foreigner, big KOL back in like 2016. He blew up on Bilibili, and he's a really funny guy. He now runs an MCN and an agency, a creative agency, and he's got a really good story. And he's kind of one of those guys that's in the trenches. So he's not just doing, he's doing the work, which I always really appreciate. And I think is much more genuine and real that way. So he's really good. I could also connect you that way if you'd like. I think also, are you familiar with Ken? He was actually the COO of PARKLU. He is the only person I know that's gone through 3 acquisitions. I don't know anybody else who has more startup acquisition experience than he does.
Elijah, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really great to have you on and learn everything about influencers and travels of PARKLU and how well you've done. And, can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I always consider a podcast a therapy session. So I appreciate the therapy session.
You're welcome. Growing a company is hard. Doing it in a foreign market? Exponentially so. The best piece of advice I can give you is not to do it alone. When you start looking across the pond for further expansion possibilities, and I sincerely hope that you do, make sure you choose the right partners to do it with. My good friends at WPIC Marketing and Technologies have almost 20 years of experience helping brands, just like yours, enter China. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Negotiation, and if you're interested in being a guest or want to connect with me or any of our team, please reach out to us at podcast@wpic.co. And be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 再见。